3, verse 5. He says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Here, the shepherd becomes, like David the shepherd, becomes David the host. What is that about? Well, David would have prepared banquets for his people or for the officials when he became king. He would maybe pour oil on the head of his guests. He might keep their cups filled while they were banqueting together. He would honor and he would provide for his guests. And there's no better example of this than in 2 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 7, where normally a king, when he became king, he might kill off all the previous king's descendants and relatives so that they wouldn't take back the throne. And David has this opportunity to do it with this man named Mephibosheth. I can't even say it. He is the crippled grandson of the previous King Saul. And this thing that David does is amazing. We sang a song about being beggars, but now we're royalty. I think the writer of that song probably had this in mind. David invites this crippled grandson to eat at his royal table. He invites him to become part of his family instead of killing him. What a picture of grace. David learned to become a gracious host. And he learned this from his very early days in 1 Samuel and chapter number 16. Because Jesse, his father, brought all his sons and he lined them up. And the prophet Samuel came and said, I'm going to anoint one of your sons to be king. And he went through all the lists of them. And he said, what's going on here? Like, he's not here. Are we missing one? Yeah, we're missing one. It's David. He's out in the field with the sheep. They bring David over. And Samuel says, this is the one. This is the one. And Samuel anoints his head with oil. David's probably a teenager at this time. This is 15 years before he actually becomes king. God has him anointed there. God says, you are my chosen king. And David learned something, that honor comes from the shepherd. It doesn't come from other people. The shepherd host welcomes him before the world recognizes him. And that's why David could say, my cup is overflowing. So in life, sometimes we're looking for the approval of someone else. We could live our entire lives living for someone's approval. Sometimes we're trying to prove something to someone who's not even alive anymore. And we're still living like we're trying to prove something to that person. Maybe mom or dad or brother or sister or some relative or some old boss. So the question is, where are you still trying to prove that you're enough? Will you receive this honor that the shepherd's giving you? Will you feast at his table? Will you feast on his word? Because his word tells you who you are, shows you how you're honored, that nothing can separate you from his love. Let the Lord set you apart with that oil. Oil is known to set us apart for something. We saw that in Leviticus with the priests, Aaron having the oil running down his beard. Let the Lord set you apart for his purposes. When he was with the sheep, David had a purpose to be with those sheep. And then when God said, I need you on the battlefield, David went on the battlefield and did what he had to do on the battlefield. And when God said, I need you to become king now, he became king. You don't have to earn a place at God's table. He's prepared it for you. So start looking for where these provisions are, because he's providing for you. Sometimes we just miss it. So the shepherd gives me honor. That's why David could say, the Lord is my shepherd, shall not want. See, when you're receiving the Lord's honor, you don't want for honor. You don't want to be looking for it in other places. Right? Now, David says, the Lord pursues me with goodness and mercy. Psalm 23 and verse 6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. David pursued wandering sheep. He didn't give up on them. In the New Testament, it says Jesus is the kind of God who leaves the 99 and goes after that one sheep that has wandered until he can bring it back to the fold. And here's the thing. David was pursued by many things in his life. I showed you how he was pursued by Saul. David was also pursued by other nations as they came to war against him. He was pursued by his own sin later in his life. He was pursued by grief. He was pursued by his very own son who tried to kill him. But looking back, David doesn't mention all those things. What he mentions is when he looks over his shoulder, he doesn't see those things. What does he see? He sees God's goodness and God's mercy. This word that he uses is like something is in hot pursuit of him, like the police are on your tail, right? And you're trying to go as fast as you can to get away from them. David says, what's in hot pursuit of me is God's goodness and God's mercy. The shepherd never stopped pursuing David. So what do you feel has been pursuing you? Has it been fear? Has it been shame? Has it been failure? Maybe regret or lack of some kind? David wants to give you a different perspective, like a different set of glasses that you can look back on your life and see it through the lens of God's goodness and God's mercy. When people walk into the office where I meet with them, Psalm 23 is literally written on the walls there. And I say, hey, can we read Psalm 23 together? And sometimes people say, yeah, I don't need to open the Bible. I have it memorized. And they can just quote it. Sometimes they say, yeah, I've read that 100 times. And what I've noticed is the thing that makes the difference for them is they knew the Psalm when they walked into the office. But what's going to make the difference when they walk out of that office is, do they know the shepherd? Do they know the shepherd in an experience of the shepherd based on the reason that they came into the office that particular day? That's what's going to make the difference for them. And that's what made the difference for David. So goodness and mercy, that's why David could say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. When you see God's mercy and his goodness in pursuit of you, you realize that you have all you need in that particular moment, because his goodness and his mercy is going to catch you. The last thing David says is that the shepherd brings him home. I never quite understood why this is at the end until today. Psalm 23, verse 6, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So David would lead his sheep out to pasture, but then he would always lead them back to the Father's house. David led them out to green pastures, but then he led them back home. And this is fitting because David spent so much of his life in the pastures, away from home. He spent his time in caves. He spent his time in the wilderness. He spent his time, if I remember correctly, in exile. He actually went to the enemy, to the Philistines, and had to live with them to stay safe for some time. But there was one thing that never left David's desire. He had this desire, and he writes it in Psalm 27, verse 4. He says, one thing have I asked of the Lord. Like this one thing. This is the only thing, one thing I want. He said, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. David's deepest longing wasn't a throne. It was to be home, to be at home with the shepherd. It was to dwell in the presence of this shepherd king we've been reading about. That's why David could say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. David's longing finds its fulfillment in Jesus. In the New Testament, Jesus is the good shepherd. Jesus is the great shepherd. Jesus is the best shepherd. He says, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. So, will you keep following this shepherd? You've been through some valleys. Will you keep following this shepherd? He knows where he's going. And maybe you've never trusted in Jesus before. Like this could be your day. Now that you've seen this shepherd, now that you've seen this God for who he is, maybe today's a day that you would trust him with your life. When you're afraid you don't have enough, when you're afraid you're not enough, when you're afraid you're not safe enough, I'm just going to encourage you, keep your eyes on the shepherd. He is leading you home. I'm going to ask Dari to come up, and we're going to take a moment to pray to our Shepherd King. Jesus, for those who are weary this morning, I pray that you would give them rest. For those who don't know which way to go, I pray that you would lead them. For those who are walking through a valley, I pray that you would remind them that you are with them. For those who are striving to prove that they're enough, Lord, help them to receive this place that you have prepared for them. For those who are pursued by fear and shame and regret or failure, let them know that your goodness and mercy is still pursuing them. And for each of us, keep us following you until the day that you bring us safely home. As the music plays, just take a moment to remain here with your shepherd. Maybe you could bring before him that place where you feel lacking the most. Just take a moment and listen for his voice there. Receive what he wants you to receive.